Maria Eduarda Duarte z Uniwersytetu w Lizbonie, którą bardzo serdecznie witamy na naszej uczelni.
Dzień dobry. I'm so sorry, that's the only word that I can say in Polish. Dzień dobry and dziękuję. It's my honor to be here again. Thank you for coming, the students, my colleagues. It's an honor for me. I'm so sorry I cannot speak Polish, but I think that's the only barrier, the only cultural barrier that we have. It's language. Because I feel home every time I come here to Wrocław to talk with my colleagues and to talk, allow me to say, with my students. I'd like to talk to you about a little bit of the perspective and the practice for career counseling in the 21st century. My approach is very simple. We need to go to the past to understand the future. And that's why I intend to do in the first moment is to talk you a little bit of the past. Phrases such as to innovate and innovation with all the values and all the meanings which are associated with them appear more and more to occupy the center of attention in the contemporary world. Moreover, such phrases was becoming somewhat of a reference, and at times more than simply in association with quality and efficiency, but in association with the character of the newness which tends to be applied in the evaluation of things. It seems as if our society is fearful of that which is not new. And when confronted with something to which we are not familiar, we look to ascertain if it is something new before asking if it is something that works or if it is good. Okay, so pay attention to that, please, because as if being new is by definition better, and it's not always the truth. That is the case of the expression, for example, of the expression career coaching, bursting onto the scene towards the latest stages of the 20th century, in particular as part of the world of organizations, and attention is easily diverted away from what was movement's first business partner, whose origins stretch a lot further back in time, and the word is career counseling. But what are we talking about when we refer to newness or innovation? Let's go to the past. For the ancient Greeks, the new was recently plugged land which has been prepared to be sown, neos. And from this origin comes the phrase newness for the harvesting of those crops. The word was also a designation for youth and, by association, that which was unexpected or out of the ordinary. The Romans also adopted the phrase and adapted from it, crafting novus. And novus, it's really a new word. And from there, this new word went about taking on meanings of its own while remaining faithful to the same origin. Innovare, for example, mean what today, at least in Latin-based language and those influenced by Latin, is seen as being to renew, or put another way, to do the same thing again. And I know that it's correct because I checked with my Polish friends. Essentially, what matters is how such things are actually done. Rather, how value is added to that which is done again, which could be simply repeating, which in the Latin origin mean to attack again to the military, or restarting, coming from the Latin cominiciare, meaning to start something again with someone, And I will try to explain later the concept of renew, and the concept of restarting into the scope of life design counseling. In the eloquence of the antiquity, speakers who relied on improvisation when speaking made use of the topos koinos, as it was known by the Greeks, or locus communis, as it was to Romans, as a model of defining, that means inventio, constructing, that means dispositio, and transforming, that means elocutio, and transform all that means the ideas, into discourse. To this end, such speakers would need to find the most adequate words varying between the sure signs, meaning those which transmitted specifically that which they wanted to say, the less secure signs, which permitted polysemy, and credible signs, those which allowed space for the audience for the introduction of their own discourse, conditioned by their own personal experiences. These words or expressions, which today could well be referred as the linguistic filters, in the sense that they work to support the speaker in order that he or she not lose track of his or her rationale, were organized in simple syllogisms which required a comparison between pairs of elements and, through time and to use, which transformed into that which we today refer as commonplace, which has nothing to do with the topos koinos or the locus communis of antiquity, easily recognized in the discourse of people with little schooling. Well, how does this all work in relation to the context of counseling? To understand that, we must define it and then look back briefly at the course of history. After much discussion, members of the American Counseling Association arrived at a consensus in definition of counseling. And they defined counseling as, and I quote, a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. Let's move to innovation and career counseling. As you all know, the first counseling services originated at the beginning of the 20th century as a process which Frank Parsons designated as vocational guidance. This was perhaps, in this particular field, the first act of innovation, in the sense that it looked toward individuals, particularly the younger generation, who lived through and felt the first results of the Industrial Revolution and were faced with the task of choosing job rather than inheriting parents' work. A new context demands new solutions and new ways of tackling the problems. This way of intervention emerged from the social workers' friendly visits and allowed for an embodiment of a new profession, which Parsons dubbed as the vocational counselor in 1908. And following the World War II, the works of Ginsburg, Axelrod, and Irma, and later the greater Donald Super, found their place in the history of counseling, firing the starting gun for the word career to take on a notable conceptual role. The major contribution is owed to Donald Super with his developmental model of considering the career as a developmental process. And from here, I think that we can identify a second innovation. From an emphasis on choosing a job to an emphasis on developing a career. And 50 years later, we reach the point of a third innovation behind Parsons' logical positivism and Super's humanism, namely the social constructionist perspective. In my opinion, that's the third innovation. But it is necessary to conceptually clarify the meaning and the process which can give body to this new conceptualization of career counseling, which has led to different meanings of professional services, such as vocational guidance and counseling, undertaken by a group of investigators. Career counseling, it's a socially constructed reality. As just one example, recall the members of the American Counseling Association by consensus socially constructed a definition of counseling. Being social constructed, counseling has a story which researchers almost invariably approach through various perspectives, but for which there are answers which appear evident. The third transition, or if you want, the third innovation, happened with the beginning of an introduction of distinction between theories of career development and theories of career counseling. The focus is placed, therefore, on constructivism. However, more important than any theoretical system is the principle of a socially constructed reality where counseling finds an objective reality as a way of understanding and also a recognition which is relatively consensual. Taking apart the commonplaces and the truth which has been instituted up to this point, for example, Holland's theory of types or Super's theory of stages, previously classified as theories of career counseling, they were re-evaluated as theory of vocational choice and its development, with the sustenance that was obtained and considered as a point of references at the Second Society for Vocational Psychology conference in 1994, I think, and which new concepts were discussed and theories of career counseling presented. These concepts can be seen in a word added by Savickas and Walsh in 1995, from which we can highlight that vocational psychology theories are not the same as career counseling theories. Vocational psychology is a specialty within applied psychology that studies vocational behavior and its development, whereas career counseling is a profession that seeks to foster career development and management. Career development theories address the knowledge question of what can we know about the problem, while career counseling theories much address the action questions of what clients may do about the problems. So, based on that distinction, the distinction between career development theories and career counseling theories, new career counseling theories have been presented using a new paradigm that, in being the natural heirs of the previous paradigms, have introduced considerable alterations which are needed not only for the survival of such paradigms in their core function, but also for the bettering of such paradigms in their adaptation to new realities. That is the case of the term life design counseling for career construction, referred as a discourse in the counseling profession. The term life design denotes the third major paradigm for career intervention, subsequent to vocational guidance and subsequent to career education. Life design is much broader than building a career. Life design includes a discourse for intimate relationships. So essentially, perhaps it can be said that the major shift in career counseling paradigms, or in the third innovation, consists of the perception that the client of counseling is no longer an individual that is catalogued and objectified through the use of measuring instruments calibrated to certain groups, for example, age, gender, or socio-professional stature, as was the case with the pioneering models, but rather through the individual who is an active participant in the process of counseling and who, through an auto-narration of one's own life story, is capable of actively playing a part in the process, giving it one's own voices, which are inevitably conditioned by the context in which one lives and by interaction with the changes that new technologies make available. Counselors who applied the structural model of vocational guidance articulated by John Holland and the development model of career education and coaching articulated by Donald Super, the counselor measures a client's abilities, interests, values, and personality, and because the counselor is permitted to do so, explains to the client how his or her scores on these measures resemble the scores of people who work in particular occupations. In the career counseling paradigm and practice of life design can be seen as a theoretical reference which feeds of a dialogic relationship through which we can define arguments, that's inventio, order them, that's dispositio, and later transforms them into words which give meaning to the narrative of each, that's elocutio. So, the role of the counselor, who is in turn a producer of speech in this dialogical relationship, consists on what? Consists on the devolution, or rather, consists on the provision of the answer, or the absence of the answer, thereby helping the counselee to find the most adequate words for the construction of one's own discourse. In this way, opening up a space in the relationship for the introduction of individual discourse relative to a life story, that means relative to uniqueness. So, we have, till the moment, three paradigms, three career counseling paradigms: guiding, developing, and designing. Guiding includes, for example, academic advising, vocational guidance, occupational placement. Developing, for example, includes career education, career coaching, and career management. And designing includes, for example, career construction and narrative therapy. So, brief, the epistemological stance and general rubric, which is today recognized as career counseling, manifests itself in many ways in the sense that, as with any other social activity, it is evolving with an increasingly vast social world. To this end, counseling cannot be practiced outside of awareness of the intersubjective consideration which allow counseling to hold a place in the paradigms of understanding. Career counseling can, in this way, be considered simultaneously as a subjective concept within a set of objective social realities. So let's move to career counseling in search of singularity. As we saw, the legacy of what 20th century theories include the substantial contributions achieved by vocational guidance, for example, the match between aptitudes and an occupation, as well as the important contributions of developmental education and coaching across the life space of Donald Super's theory. But the realities of the 21st century are obviously different than those which prompt the development and implementation of models and paradigms during almost the entire 20th century. Indeed, the realities of the 21st century are quite different. Today, social, economic, and political changes are occurring across the entire world, and the problems which affect large sectors of the population, for example, unemployment, the quality of living standards, and the transition from school to work, have contributed to the emergence of new perspectives in the counseling profession. Indeed, guidance and coaching, in a broader sense, partners with life in that they can help individuals to become consciously aware of their own careers, their lifestyle, and their options, and can help to attribute a greater sense of importance to people's work and to people's lives. as careers, now seen as the story of each individual's working life, are a journey or a trajectory characterized by successive professional promotions and the climbing of the professional ladder. Such careers are limited to an increasingly reduced number of professions. In light of the above, and in understanding career intervention in the 21st century, we must consider new and varied aspects, namely the parameters that guide its application. For example, examining the knowledge of new models and techniques and the working tools available in order to provide a richer supportive relationship in a way that better fits into a society in which individual is responsible for their particular path. We know that some researchers have worked to allow for a set of new approaches, and some examples can be cited. For example, Peavy's sociodynamic approach, Cochrane's narrative career counseling, McMahon and Watson's storytelling model, Kobusmare's career construction model, or Young and collaborators' action theory. Or another example, my favorite, I'm sorry, but it's my favorite. That's the life design. That does not deny the roots in vocational psychology and looks to implement a theory of vocational behavior, namely the career construction theory. But please, keep in mind one thing very important. Theories are only mental representations. I repeat, are only mental representations. All of them, including life design. Sorry. The fact that one of the core elements of life designing or counseling for career and self-construction is relationships represents, or at least should represent, an equal involvement between the counselor and the counselee. The counselor breaks the modus faciendi, stops being the all-powerful professional, and establishes a relationship of usefulness with the client. The idea of an equal relationship in the life design process represents, or at least could represent, the rupturing of the ideological notion which predominated until the end of the 20th century. It represents the counselor's work placed at the service of the individual and not of an ideology, or, you might say, of the established power. Let us look as to why. Learning with the history of counseling, following the path of paradigms, stretching back to vocational guidance, and then onto the career education coaching, and now into life design with domains of career intervention, the work of the counselor is founded in more or less refined theoretical approaches. However, the same doubt always rears its head. Theory at the service of the established power or of the people. The fact that we can consider that the client is the only specialist when it comes to the content of their story, whereas the counselor is a specialist when it comes to the process, clearly denotes that the work of the counselor is placed in the service of each person's story and not in the service of an ideology. The counselor leads from behind the client. Excuse me the pun, but it is story time. So, the other core element of life design is reflection. And reflection represents, or at least could represent, a better understanding of the artificiality of the creation and definition of barriers. Each client has a story that tells their life biography and that tells about life. The work of the counselor consists of assisting the client in understanding that same artificiality, in the sense that although it may seem strange, the principle of consistency can always be found underlying in all of us. That consistency is the same fact, the same little story, which can be analyzed from different perspectives. The strategy here is not about a fight for power, but rather the return of power. It is the client that should hold the power, and this is the path to be taken to ensure that this power is not given to others in an abdication of one's individuality and only through possession that is our life. The counselor is not some kind of power proxy, but can be useful in taking off the mask, the persona, as in the Greek theater, that conceals the actor's voice. Taking off the mask is a fight for power, which is centered on the client, or the name as the author, as Savickas takes such pleasure in telling us. The client, as an author, actually authorizes the validity of the story. The fact is that the counselor prompts and sometimes guides the process of reflection to help clients fit in the coherence and highlight the continuity in the collection of stories which are being told. And this reflection produces new perspectives, spurs new realizations, clarifies meaning, and deepens emotions, all of which clarify what is at stake and enhance decision-making. So the third core element is sense-making. And so often, as life design counselors hear their clients repeat phrases such as, "that makes sense," or "I just realized that," the fact that that core element represents, or at least could represent, the rewriting of the script of life itself. Sense-making is a core element in life design because it clarifies life purpose, fosters intentionality, and encourages commitment to self. It is the principal process in the meaning-making dialogue. So, this new generation of career counseling theories support coaches and counselors' interventions. It is a time to put an end to the crack of career counseling versus career coaching. Both can serve the needs of the individuals and can serve the needs of the work market. Brief, we may consider a big difference between vocational guidance and career education for students and career coaching for adults during last century. But at the 21st century, those differences are more artificial than real, even considering theoretical or practical interventions. Because we know that there are some common aspects to the various theories, models, approaches mentioned. One such aspect is generally found in the various games of coordination, which involves a tacit cooperation, that is work alliance, between counselee and counselor, or between coaches and coachees. Both should mutually understand and be capable of coordinating dialogues. For example, as a crew rowing on board a boat would in order to reach their destination. Another point in common is that it appears possible to identify an evident affinity between the discipline's procedural devices, which could be referred to as a disciplinary identity, and the three channels through which a science develops, as well as the three orders through which such a definition is framed. There is an historical order to the definition. For example, an attempt to relate a concept with that which is already historically known about the topic. There is a logical order through which a science that evolves to a certain point of stability decides to organize in terms in a form more convenient than the random sequence presented by history. And third, there is an attempt to establish some basic dispositions for the discipline when it relates some operational fundamentals with specific basic concepts. So the utilization of the concept of counseling through one or another theoretical framework presupposes a consideration of the three orders that I told you about a few minutes ago. However, One thing is the basic affinity between process of understanding that allow various theories to affirm themselves and to progress. Another is the definition of the concept of counseling. The definition is seen for its instrumental character, but innovatively. It should affirm that any and all information which comes to be proposed by theory never, but never coincides with the extensive area covered by the definition in question. There are always phenomena which escape the definition, including the evident, including the individual, here being, once again, uniqueness. So, to be clear, I wish to summarize here, and I'd like to tell you that it's newness. That means to renew. Career counseling denotes a multifaceted discipline with three major paradigms. The first paradigm is logical positivism and its intervention practices of vocational guidance and academic advice. The second paradigm is humanism with its intervention practices of career education and career coaching. And the third paradigm is social constructionism, with its practice of self-construction and life design dialogues. I view the practices as verbs, not nouns. Career counselors can guide, coach, and dialogue. Career coach can guide, coach, and dialogue. Psychotherapists can guide, coach, and dialogue. Distinguish between nouns and verbs may help to temper the disciplinary wars by asserting that the professional group does not own the practices. We must consider the difference which exists between the definition of the concept of career counseling and the theories and practices through which it operates, starting by recognizing that it would be difficult to bring about a definition of counseling without an implicit theory of counseling, while the construction of a theory does not necessarily oblige the establishment of a definition of counseling. Or, if you want to put another way, the study of career counseling has, in some theories, not exulated a particular class of things through a definition. The class of things which are called career counseling exists, which means guiding, advising, coaching, educating, dialoguing. And it's manifested through a historical legacy which is constantly present in both social and cultural memory, as well as thought the demands of age which permit the restricting of that legacy. It is for that reason that life design paradigm is valuable or contestable, not for having established a definition of career counseling, but for having provided a new perspective and practices through which career counseling can function. The paradigm of designing takes its place as a practice of career counseling. It does not replace guiding or coaching. What appears to be important is that life design paradigm allows for a separation of definition and theory, in doing so, showing that theory can be used as a dynamic alternative to a definition. Or if you want, put another way, in separating definition and theory, we also distinguish consequently the attitude which formulates the definition, which attitude is expressed through theory. And contrary to the definition, theory does not look at counseling as an ideal construction, but rather as an open process which is objectivized in different ways. For example, guiding, coaching, designing, and which fulfills different roles at different times. And on the contrary to a definition, theory has what is needed for the discovery of career constructing through life stories, for the reconstruction of one's narrative, and for the co-construction of an identity narrative. Because career counseling is not a closed concept. It is capable of integrating new elements, such as life design dialogues and a narrative conception of the self. Or the life design can also integrate psychological, organizational, and business issues, and choose not to integrate therapeutic process, as can be seen, for example, in an executive coaching model developed by colleagues from Belgium. So I use a beautiful motto of a congress that was held in Japan last year, and the motto of the congress was diversity in harmony. And I think that's a wonderful motto. And we can put coaching on the fence, which separates career education for students from career education for employees. Or it can work as a bridge between career educational and executive coaching. It can make use of theoretical scopes. For example, career coaching and practices which break down that same fence, thereby permitting the development and progress of career intervention practices. In what concerns career coaching, in a modern day approach, it seems it is coherent to consider that career coaching, remember, as a verb, does not have a theoretical body which could be autonomous or independent from career counseling in this broader sense as a general rubric subsuming diverse intervention practices. We may say that career coaches, as a noun, utilize the modern generation of psychological practices, including life design. The core requirement of these interventions as verbs is about the competencies that are required to do such or such work functions. The core requirements of the professions is the way that they certify the competencies of counselors, coaches, and psychologists or educators as nouns. So, in order to foster the development and delivery of adequate career counseling in various settings over the next, I hope, 10 years, it is imperative that we attend to the challenges that lie ahead. Namely, the provision of counseling interventions must take into account the changing nature of work, namely the preparation of all citizens for either normative or non-normative transitions. Needs for counseling are different and imply the use of different types of intervention and techniques. New tasks and new clients for counseling services because of mobility and immigration situations. Increased cooperation among counseling services from different countries. That's a learning process coming from life design. It is certain that there is no such thing as a universally accepted practice, meaning that what is taken to be counseling is diluted through a considerable number of theories which have been given here a brief perspective. It is also certain that even in a critical analysis, which does not make an explicit use of any theory, we can always identify a terminology that in some way reveals a determined theoretical perspective relative to counseling. This happens because any analysis comes about from a learning process. A learning process comes about through understanding, and understanding comes about through an empirical context, which can be used as theory. An understanding through analysis that only a theory is capable of facilitating. For this reason, and contrary to a definition, theory can also take into account intersections with social manifestations, thereby generating the possibility of self-reflective thought can allow for a capacity of self-regeneration. To give an example, let us take the terminology of construct, reconstruct, and co-construct, which represents a theoretical perspective of life design, or a need to develop more cultural approaches, clearly embedded in the storytelling model of Mary McMahon and Mark Watson. New paths for careers are opening in career counseling theories, both from the theoretical point of view as well as from the point of view of the actual intervention, thereby allowing for counseling to be understood as an interrogative process of critical thinking. This is the path to be followed to unveil an eventual new objective for a new theory that one day will be announced in a publication or in a conference. Essentially, this will be the new start of a new study of new problems that counseling will bring about. Here, we can close the circle, renew and restart. To this end, constructivist or constructionist approaches, or the theorization of narrative, will continue to chase an end, without such approaches actually being that end, because the end is always the start of a new path. It appears as if reality is given historical form to career counseling, because it is a specific field that deals with an actual reality. For example, the life design takes on a form of looking at things with a sufficient consistency and coherency in order to construct itself with a specified and permanently transitory truth branded by time and in light of a certainty that it will always be probabilistic. A way of looking at things that drags along with the existence of its own ontology, in the sense that a way of looking at things prefigures the way of being looked at. This is not a case of the way things are, but rather the way that tend to be. Career counseling has already come a long way falling on from the paths opened by its ancestors. A path tackled as if it were a journey. And last year, I quoted your Nobel Prize Zimborska. Allow me today to quote a Portuguese poet, a very important Portuguese poet, Fernando Pessoa. Travel. One need only exist to travel. I go from day to day, as from station to station, in the train of my body or my destiny. Leaning out over the streets and squares, over people's faces and gestures, always the same and always different, just like scenery. If I imagine, I see. What more do I do when I travel? Only extreme poverty of imagination justifies having travel to fill. Any road, this simple and fatal road, would lead you to the end of the world. But the end of the world, when we go around this full circle, is the same endful from which we started out. The end of the world, like the beginning, is in fact our concept of the world. It is in us that the scenery is scenic. If I imagine, I create it. If I create it, it exists. If it exists, then I see it like any other scenery. So, why travel? In Madrid, Berlin, Persia, China, and the north of South Pole, where would I be but in myself, in my particular type of sensations? Life is what we make of it. Travel is the travel. What we see isn't what we see, but what we are. In the end, life design is in symphony with poetry. Tell me your story. Retelling me your story. Construct, reconstruct, and co-construct. However, it is not as names are. Designations for understanding that life is what you make it if and that what you see is not what you see, but rather what it is. Everything is relative. Even that newness which we believe to be ours. It is not new, but simply the result of a different view. Maybe life design, being constructed and sustained in the notion of dialogue or discourse, can work as an initial model for the promotion of a unified field of career counseling, although respected the real meaning of diversity that can live together with harmony. So, before I finish, I just want to say thank you for our translator. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your attention. And this slide, we don't need translation. Thank you for your attention. If you want...
Dziękuję Państwu za uwagę.
Did you translate? You thank you for our translator? Yes?
Yeah.
She didn't translate. Thank you for our translator, please.
Bardzo dziękujemy pani profesor za przybliżenie nam zmian, które dotyczą zarówno praktyki, jak i teorii poradnictwa kariery. Widzimy także te zmiany, doświadczamy ich, widzimy też pewien rozdźwięk pomiędzy tym, co dzisiaj myślimy o poradnictwie kariery, a tym, co jest jeszcze wciąż w oficjalnych dokumentach zapisane, ponieważ oficjalnie, pomimo tych zmian, o których pani profesor mówiła i o których my wiemy, wciąż w dokumentach funkcjonuje nazwa doradztwo zawodowe. Jest to dla nas jednak bardzo ważne, że pani profesor podkreśla te zmiany i jest to dla nas kolejny sygnał, żebyśmy też mocniej upominali się o to, aby ta zmiana nie tylko właśnie w zakresie praktyk, ale tak, żeby ona się pojawiła i w nazwach, i także w oficjalnych dokumentach, które dotyczą naszych działań. Czy macie Państwo może jakieś pytania? Chcielibyście jeszcze o coś dopytać?
Jeśli mi wolno zabrać głos, a to też dlatego, że pokazać, że nie tylko słuchaliśmy, ale cokolwiek zrozumieliśmy z tego wykładu, bo opowieść była bardzo piękna, wręcz hipnotyzująca. To mam takie pytanie, czy ja dobrze rozumiem tą opowieść pani profesor na bardzo wysokim poziomie. Chciałem stanąć w obronie pewnego Greka. Mianowicie Grecy nie tylko obracali ziemię, żeby na nowo coś tam zobaczyć, ale był taki Grek Sokrates, który był poniekąd pierwszym doradcą. I teraz, pani profesor, jest takie pytanie. On, słuchając rozmaitych opowieści tam ludzi na rynku, pytał się tych ludzi, czy ty, człowieku, wiesz, co naprawdę masz na myśli? Czy ty rozumiesz, czy ty pojmujesz to, co ty opowiadasz? I teraz tutaj mamy taki kontrast między opowieścią a definiowaniem. Ja mam takie pytanie, czy samo opowiadanie nie prowadzi właśnie do zdefiniowania, do zrozumienia pewnych rzeczy, no bo inaczej mamy do czynienia z grami językowymi, a my właściwie chcemy te gry językowe własnej klienta troszkę zburzyć, zbudować na nowo i może zdefiniować. Sokrates odkrył definicję, znaczenie definiowania, a nie tylko opowiadania i teoretyzowania. Jakby pani profesor powiedziała, czy jest konflikt z Sokratesem, czy jest pani po stronie Sokratesa?
Thank you very much for your question. I agree with you. I do not disagree with Socrates, but we have just a little bit of advance that we are capable to theorize the dialogues. That's the main difference. That's the importance of theorize the dialogues, including dialogues that are included in a theoretical approach. But that's nothing is new. Socrates at the Agora with his students, he talked about the virtues, and he talked already about social justice, and he talked already about decent work. So we are not invented anything. our roots, our perspectives are only rooted in ancient Greek. But we have the possibilities, because of the new technologies, to theorize a little bit further than Socrates. Did I answer?
Jeśli nie ma pytań, to dzisiaj bardzo serdecznie Państwu dziękujemy. Dziękujemy przede wszystkim pani profesor za ten inspirujący wykład.
Thank you. Thank you very